This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's May 8th, 2025. On this day in 1895, the Nashville Ladies Bicycle Club held its first meeting. You know how these things go with affinity groups that are just starting out. The first meeting is really just a matter of figuring out what they are, how it should work, things like that. But they did take a vote on a matter of policy. The ladies decided their official stance on a quite heated question of the time, namely that bloomers were not appropriate cycling attire. And this is one of those moments where I wish I got an in-person edit on my scripts for this podcast, because I would love to see the look on Miriam Kramer's face reacting to that decision. She edits this podcast, and she often commutes to work on a bike. I've yet to see her do so in a skirt. Miriam, you're breaking the dress code. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It probably will not come as any surprise for me to say this, but WPLN is a pretty bike-friendly workplace. When we built our studios back in 1998, our management team made a point of having the architect put showers in the bathroom so that they could take lunchtime bike rides on a nearby greenway. But for a long time, the only staff member who dared to try to commute to work on a bike was Ed Lambert, who had an I can make anything work if I'm clever about it attitude, and the advantage of having spent a few years working at a Nashville bike shop and trading tips with the city's most hardcore bicycle enthusiasts about how to get around safely on two wheels. And 20, 30 years ago, it took a lot of gumption and information to bike here. And while this is still far from a truly bike-friendly city, it's definitely become the kind of place where it's more realistic for people to at least try to bike, which is reflected in the small squad of folks who often ride to the station together these days. It's been interesting to see just how many layers of infrastructure changes have been necessary to improve the situation for bikers. Various types of bike lanes, from streets with painted symbols meant to remind motorists that they're sharing the road with bikes, to protected bike lanes on certain routes, to adding bike racks on WeGo buses so that people can do a combo of public transit where possible and using a bike to go the rest of the way to a place not served by the bus. At the start of last year, a national group called People for Bikes singled out a stretch of 12th Avenue South as one of the nation's best new developments for bike riders. And that mile-and-a-half section of the street is a good indication of what the Nashville Department of Transportation considers a best-case scenario for improvements yet to come around the rest of the city. The dedicated bike lane is fully separated from the rest of traffic, not just a painted line or a string of slim posts sticking up from the pavement. The divider is made of planters that both create a physical buffer for safety purposes and assist in stormwater management by absorbing rainfall. It's pretty great, and it's still pretty unusual around here. There are a lot of reasons why Nashville has been slow to improve its biking infrastructure. Funding has always been an issue. Space is part of it, too. A lot of our streets are as wide as they can realistically be, and you can't just slap on an extra lane without having to adjust the whole roadway. It's also one of those things where the discussion of whether to change gets caught in the chicken or egg cycle of, well, nobody bikes here, so why bother? Versus, of course, people aren't out on bikes yet, because who would be without improvements happening first? But bike improvements are baked into the transit plan that voters approved in November. It includes 35 miles of either new or improved protected bike lanes. And the nonprofit Walk Bike Nashville is a persistent voice pushing for more bikeable connectivity throughout the city. They backed the transit plan while also making it clear that they're not satisfied with those 35 miles, and they will continue to push for more. And really, as the city keeps growing and growing, it seems like it's only natural that transportation that doesn't involve a car should become a more and more realistic option for people. Bikes are way cheaper than cars for people on tight budgets, for one thing. They take up less space on increasingly crowded streets. The more people bike, the less space needs to be given over to parking. The list of practicalities goes on and on. But it is a paradigm shift, and we all have to get better at understanding how the rules of the road work when cars and bikes are in the same spaces. All too many of us got our driver's licenses in a time and place where bikes were truly just a non-factor. I know my driver's ed just breezed on through how to drive around someone on a bike. And sometimes, especially in the case of people who are on those rental bikes, I definitely see people on two wheels making very unsafe choices that aren't in line with the traffic rules. The city of Nashville does have a downloadable map of bike lanes, and on it there are reminders of those rules and just general safety tips. It tells adult riders to stay on the roads, not the sidewalks. Bikes are considered vehicles, after all. Riders are advised to signal their turns, to make eye contact with motorists when turning or changing lanes, and to watch out for vehicles that are parallel parked and stay far enough to the left that they won't run into a suddenly open car door. It explains the various types of bike lanes in Nashville and how they're supposed to work. And the map includes reminders of motorists' responsibilities, too. Our traffic laws say drivers should always leave a 3-foot clearance around bicycles. You need to respect them as fellow vehicles when they're in shared lanes of traffic. And there's no circumstance where it's okay to drive in a bike lane, not even if someone's taking their time waiting for a chance to turn left and you really, really want to dodge around them. But mostly, it all just boils down to being aware, using common sense, and accepting that there are multiple modes of transportation at play. The main goal is to make sure that all of us, no matter what we're sitting on or in as we travel the streets, are able to make it to our destinations in one piece. In just a few minutes, how 2 teachers are supporting their students in the face of increasing crackdowns on undocumented immigrants. That's coming up after the newscast.
Here's the mantra I think about at WPLN. We connect the dots. It captures a mindset that our journalism is not merely about the latest press release or proclamations by officials. Instead, we can develop expertise, dig deeper, and look to history to understand what's happening now. I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director. When I'm planning coverage and editing stories, the best part is being part of a team that's curious about our community and invested in its future.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Metro officials are moving to clarify that city police did not have a role in immigration arrests in South Nashville over the weekend. The Tennessee Highway Patrol says it was involved in more than 300 traffic stops, resulting in 94 people being detained by ICE. The traffic stops and arrests set off protests outside of the ICE facility where detainees were held. Following the raid, residents aired concerns about MNPD's involvement. That's because officers were present at the federal facility where the protests took place. A timeline provided yesterday by Metro's law director says the arrests caught the city, quote, by surprise, and that city officers were not present during arrests. The city is also sharing phone call recordings to explain their presence at the ICE facility. In one, a federal official requested extra patrols in case of backlash.
If we can just kind of have it monitored, just to make sure nothing's getting crazy, that'd be great. And it also, no one might show up. It's just something that they're just trying to prevent. They're kind of anticipating some anger from the families.
Okay.
Metro Council held a specially called committee meeting last night to discuss immigration enforcement. Emotions flared as the council members questioned police about the immigration arrests, and residents voiced concerns and made requests of city leaders.
I'm an old lady in my 70s. You can lock me up, but I do not want my neighbors taken away.
As it is budget season, Metro needs to increase dedicated funding for legal aid.
Businesses in the area are suffering, trust in government agencies is declining, and all of us, regardless of our immigration status, should be alarmed.
That was Michelle Flynn, Ezra Howard, and Sagnia Vargas. The arrests have drawn condemnation from city officials and multiple advocacy groups and support from the House Republican caucus. Metro Legal says it will continue pressing ICE for the names of who was detained. A group of students wrote a letter to the Nashville mayor and the Metro Police Superintendent in response to the detainments. They expressed concern about ICE agents entering schools and say their peers are not attending classes out of fear. The letter asks city leaders to declare areas where young people gather off limits for ICE agents. This includes schools, community centers, and libraries. Students pointed to a law that makes it a crime for local officials to support sanctuary policies, calling it unconstitutional. The law also promotes collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE. The letter has been signed by more than 80 students. 3 former Memphis police officers have been found not guilty on all counts in the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols. The state charges included second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, and official misconduct. All 3 of the federal officers were already convicted of separate federal charges last year. Nichols was fatally beaten 2 years ago after being pulled over for alleged reckless driving. His death sparked protests against police brutality. A motion for a mistrial has been denied in the ongoing corruption case against a former Tennessee House Speaker. Glenn Cassada and his former chief of staff, Cade Cothran, are accused of running an illegal kickback scheme. At issue is a recording prosecutors played of an interview between Cassada and FBI agents. It was supposed to be redacted for jurors. The judge in the case, Eli Richardson, decided what jurors heard, which was not redacted, was not prejudicial enough for the trial to start over. The government has now rested its case, meaning the accused men's attorneys will have a chance to call their own witnesses starting this morning. Tennessee was part of a nationwide push by Republican state legislatures this year to challenge federal education rights. The Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank that wrote the blueprint for the Trump administration's Project 2025 policies, called on states last year to pass bills challenging the right to an education for students without citizenship. Those bills ultimately failed. Speaking on yesterday's episode of This Is Nashville, WPLN's Miriam said Tennessee's version passed the Senate, but was pulled from consideration in the House.
There were a lot of other state legislatures that had bills like this that did not advance. In the case of Oklahoma, their state superintendent was really gung-ho about a similar bill, and the governor there vowed to block it. And both of them are Republicans, and we've seen Republican opposition to this bill. But Tennessee has gotten the farthest. And so I guess what we're looking at next year is if they will get far enough to challenge Plyler v. Doe, that Supreme Court case that established the right to an education for all students.
Tennessee Republicans intend to bring the legislation back next year. The bill's House sponsor, William Lamberth, is in talks with the federal government to ensure the bill's passage would not jeopardize more than $1 billion in federal education funding. The new budget for Metro Nashville Public Schools is being heralded as a significant increase compared to last year. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on what programs these additional funds will support.
Mental health services and more support to prepare for colleges and careers are just some programs prioritized by the city's new budget. Mayor Freddie O'Connell's annual address noted education as the budget's biggest investment. School Board Chair Frida Player thanked the mayor for making education a priority.
Particularly to support our employees and our students so we can continue making the record gains that we've had year over year.
The mayor's budget also promises a nurse in every school, 23 more school safety officers, and more support for kids with disabilities and students learning English. Player hopes this can have a long-term positive impact.
These investments help us to prove and grow and make more gains, and that we will be the top education system in the state, and then we're making our way up to the country.
The investments are paying off, with Metro schools having their highest graduation rate in history this year. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
The CEO of the Tennessee Valley Authority says the utility is now considering operating coal plants in Kentucky and Tennessee beyond retirement dates the utility set during the Biden administration. Hannah Saad with member station WKMS reports the decision was announced on a recent conference call.
The federal utility had previously stated its goals to retire its coal fleet by 2035. But now, CEO Don Mall says it's considering operating its 4 coal-fired power plants beyond that initial goal date. That comes following executive orders from President Donald Trump aimed at boosting the coal industry and others targeting energy and environmental regulations. Mall said its coal plants in West Paducah, Kentucky, and in Gallatin, Tennessee have strong potentials to operate for the foreseeable future, and that TVA is evaluating options for its Kingston and Cumberland plants in Tennessee. Trump also recently granted exemptions from some pollution safeguards to all 4 of those coal plants. I'm Hannah Saad in Murray.
Around 6 in 10 Tennesseans from across the political spectrum say the U.S. economy is in bad shape. That's according to a new poll from Vanderbilt University. The same percentage of people say they're worried about being able to pay for an emergency, like medical care or car repairs. Vanderbilt researchers say that's a higher level of economic worry than their poll 5 years ago, which was taken during the first months of the pandemic. Support for President Donald Trump's tariffs is down 11 points compared to December, before he took office. But views are split on party lines. Over 75% of Republicans support the tariffs, while more than 90% of Democrats oppose them. The poll found Tennesseans have a rosier view of the state economy, but that a vast majority of Democrats and Republicans contend the sales tax on groceries is too high. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Amid President Trump's sweeping immigration crackdown, some Nashville schools have reported a drop in attendance for students without permanent legal status. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on how 2 teachers are supporting these families while sometimes teaching half-empty classrooms.
Since taking office, Trump's immigration policies have included a pledge of mass deportation, increased detainments, and targeting sanctuary cities. In Nashville, some teachers have noticed a dip in attendance.
Especially in classes where I have students that do come from undocumented backgrounds or are undocumented themselves. Just news reports about ICE raids and potentially coming to schools and were schools safe or not. I think that also prompted students to just not come.
That's Ruby Aguilar, a teacher at a Nashville high school with a large immigrant population. WPLN News is not identifying the school to protect the privacy of the students.
So definitely have seen attendance kind of drop on certain days, around certain events, certain times.
Schools were typically off limits for immigration and customs enforcement. But Trump got rid of the policy preventing agents from arresting people without permanent legal status in places like schools, hospitals, and churches. Research shows increased immigration enforcement can lead to chronic absenteeism among students. Aguilar says absences throw off her lesson plans, which often include group assignments.
And it's really hard when you've planned for that and you don't have half of the classes missing.
So she must pivot, sometimes just meeting with her students one-on-one instead. Worse are the students who stop coming altogether. She says their parents feel there's no longer a pathway towards citizenship, so they pick up and leave.
I could not imagine being a 15, 16-year-old and coming home and, hearing my parents tell me hey, tomorrow we're leaving. And I have this whole life that I've built in Nashville, and now we're just dropping it all.
It's heartbreaking, she says, when students are so close to graduating.
My student that recently left, literally a day ago, he had 2 years left. There was just so much that he could have done.
Similarly, Sarah Sunshine says 3 of her third-grade students at another Nashville school have also moved back to their home countries. Though young, she says, these students know what's going on. They often tell her things they've overheard their parents talking about, and they're scared.
At 8 and 9 years old, this is not something they should be having to worry about.
Sunshine teaches about 70 English learner students in Antioch. Like Aguilar, her school has a large immigrant population. She says the changing immigration policies make her job more difficult.
It's just hard to focus on teaching because there's just so many other things going on.
Sunshine and Aguilar praise their schools for supporting immigrant students. The TESOL International Association provides support for teachers of English language students. This includes guiding them to legal services or how to respond in the event of a raid. TESOL's Director of Advocacy and Public Policy, Jeff Hutchison, says funding cuts to English language instruction weakens the U.S.'s global outreach.
When funding is cut off, when research is cut off, we are losing so much.
Hutchison says he's heard from many English learner teachers that their kids are missing class, but it's too early to get data on just how widespread the issue is. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.